Hey guys, Joey Thomas here, entrepreneur and small business educator with 17 hats. Today, I am excited to bring Jacqueline M. Baker of Scarlet Communications. Hey, Jacqueline.
Hello,
How
hello.
are you?
I'm so great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. See, I love doing these video interviews because we learn so much insight about how you grew your business and how you were able to do it just really by yourself, right? And now you have a team that you're working with, but I am excited to learn about your journey. So let's jump right in, Jacqueline. So Jacqueline, what do you do?
Ooh, what do I do? I help people elevate to their next level using modern etiquette and everyday leadership. So at its core, that is what I do.
Oh man, elevate to the next level. I love that. We can just end right here because who doesn't need that?
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't need that? I mean, every single day, if we can have that mentality, how can I be a little bit better than the day before? But the problem is, Jacqueline, we don't all know how to do that.
We don't feel like we know how to do that. We might
I
know, but we
know.
don't feel like it. Yeah.
I know. So the name of your business is Scarlet Communications, right? And so tell me a little bit about that name. I love the name Scarlet. So tell me a little bit about where that came from.
Absolutely. I love the name Scarlet too. And this story is actually going to be a bit of a surprise to lots of people because I never talk about this. It is not in writing anywhere. It is not in our story manifesto or anything of that nature. The quick backstory is many years ago, my sister and I were at my grandmother's house going through paperwork, and I ran across a birth certificate. And I said to my sister, "Who's Scarlet? Like, who is Scarlet?" And my sister was like, "Oh, that's our mom's real name." Now, I knew that my mom was adopted. I knew that, but I never knew actually growing up that her name when she was born was Scarlet. The world knows her as Betty. Everyone around her knows her as Betty. And so I fell in love with the name. I got enamored with the name and I named the company Scarlet. And most of the world doesn't know this because I only answered this question if someone directly asked me, but that is truly where the name came from.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And you can always change it to Betty. Betty, communications, right?
I could, but
you could.
No.
But no, I love it. I love it. And you are a leadership consultant, correct?
I am.
And so in the world of leadership, I would think when I hear the term leadership, I mean, that kind of encompasses everything we do as business owners, right? And yet, so many small business owners start off with, hey, I got to do my trade correctly, right? I need all the new gadgets. I need to learn how to do, I don't know, just bookkeeping and all of this stuff. And we focus so much of that. But where does leadership come into play when we're starting a business?
I love that. Clearly, I love this question. Like I wouldn't be who I was or did what I did if I didn't love this question. And I'm going to first just take you on a small little trip back to my last corporate gig.
Let's do it. I'm right there with you.
All right. So my last corporate gig, when I left corporate, my last role, I served as vice president of startup programming within AARP Innovation Labs. And so my job was to discover some of the best and brightest startups all across the world in the fintech and health tech space. And of course, for lots of people, when they start a company and they start growing it, so perk up, everyone who's listening, who's either someone who started or you're ready to grow a little bit more. Sometimes you get to a place where you're able to collaborate with corporations, right? You get a chance to do B2C work, which is often exciting, right? And often many times lucrative. Well, for me, because my role was discovering some of the best and brightest founders, these very small companies at the time, I got really a pop the hood opportunity and a behind the scenes opportunity to see what happens when people go from I'm just working by myself to, oh, I need to collaborate with other organizations and work with other people. And sometimes it's hard to go from what I call founder to foundation. And I know how it is when you're tinkering, you're just getting started, you just want to go, you're just doing. You just want to get your little thing done. But here's the thing. The quicker that you start to think about your leadership development and your leadership journey, the easier that it gets when you start to add on people and add on contractors and start to collaborate with organizations, because you start to give yourself permission to be a better delegator right? And a better public speaker, and someone who can deal with self-confidence and deal with imposter syndrome and all those things that pop up that you don't expect, and they will pop up. And so my approach is always from day one, I want you to be good at whatever it is that you're doing, your craft, but also recognize that it is your job from day one to see yourself as a leader and to put more things in your leadership toolkit as you go along, so that it's easier once you get to some of those forks in the road, or you start to collaborate with big organizations or even other partners as well. And so that's how I see leadership playing into the founder to foundation path, and how you should see yourself as a leader out the gate.
You know, it's so that's wonderful. I can see a lot of people, or hear a lot of people just saying, hey, you know, it's just me and I just started. So, you know, and there's this mentality of, hey, you get what you get, right? This is who I am. You get what you get. And so as a person who's not working with other people and maybe doesn't even have a goal to work with other people, I would imagine that leadership skills come into play, even working with other vendors, with other clients. So I would love to hear a little bit about that. What type of leadership skills come into play in just dealing with clients?
Absolutely. So first things first is, before we even add other people to the party, whether it be vendors or clients or contractors or whoever else, there is this other little really important wheel of leadership, like one of the 4 segments as we define it in the Scarlet world. It is the most important part of the leadership wheel, and it is self-leadership. Independent of if you're managing other people, you're managing organizations, you're managing movements, the other 3 pillars of the leadership wheel altogether, you are responsible for self-leadership. And self-leadership encompasses really talking back to that nagging little thing in the back of your mind that's trying to trick you out of your greatness.
Mhm.
That's all self-leadership right there. But if we start to add other people to the party, like vendors, think about how important it is for you to communicate, which is one of the key components of self-leadership and leading other people as well. The ability to clearly communicate. Sometimes the ability to delegate, because one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make, and I'm sure, Joey, you've seen this as well, when you start to add on vendors and contractors and you're delegating work out, but then you're hoarding the work still. So you're paying people to do stuff that you're really just still doing. And that's a key skill, independent of if you have a staff, if you have a team behind you. You may have just hired someone, even a social media support person, to do something for you. But if you've delegated it out, but you're still hoarding the tasks, you're ineffective at it and you're wasting money. And so all those things still fall very cleanly underneath the leadership wheel and leadership opportunities.
That's great. You know, self-leadership, gosh, that just goes into so much, doesn't it? It goes into just discipline,
Yeah.
right? And discipline falls into so many areas, you know, just getting your tasks done, responding, even simple things like responding to emails.
Completely.
Right. And
I'll
so,
I'll say
but
too, Joey, that the reality is, the quicker that you see yourself as a leader, right, it also gives you permission to enter into other realms, to try new things, to be open to new things. Instead of waiting for somebody to come and tap you on your shoulder and say, hey, you're a leader, seeing yourself as that is really critical for a couple of reasons. Number one is, you don't need permission, right? Sometimes you're just waiting around for someone to give you permission to lead. No, like, just by nature of you starting something new, you're already in the leadership realm, but you have to give yourself permission in order to start operating in that way. But the other reason why it's important to see yourself in that is because even when you are a solopreneur, right? Even when you are working your butt off and you're working by yourself, most of us end up in a space of growth, right? You can say scale if you want, because I know scale sometimes scares people. So we'll just say growth, okay? When you end up in this realm where you're growing and you have to manage more things, sometimes overnight you have to add people to your team, and maybe not as a staff person, but maybe as a contractor. The quickly that you see yourself as a leader, the easier it is to transition from self-leadership to leading other people. But if overnight you get people that you have to manage, guess what? Now I got to go back and convince myself that I'm a self-leader in order to effectively lead other people, in order to effectively lead organizations and movements. And so out the gate, if you see yourself as a self-leader, it just gets you easier, and it makes the transition to leading other people a whole lot easier as well.
yeah, that's fantastic. Do you find that developing systems is a key area of self leadership?
Absolutely. And I will even say that it actually fits cleanly in my world of delegation. All right.
Right.
For me, I'm a doer, Joey. Like I like to do. And so I talk about delegation a lot because it is definitely something throughout my overall leadership and growth and development journey that I've had to spend a lot of time on. And it's because the very first company that I ever started in my early 20s was a wedding and event production business.
Mhm.
Because so much rolled on our backs in terms of like the buck stops here. We have to make sure that the bride gets down the aisle, the ring bearer gets down the aisle, like everything was in our hands. We really hoarded the tasks to make sure that things happen the way that they were supposed to. But now I'm beyond that. I don't do that anymore. But those mannerisms and characteristics like still are on my back sometimes.
Mhm.
So for me, I've had to become much more effective at a delegation and be intentional about it. But before I could afford to have a virtual assistant, before I can afford to hire somebody to manage social media, before I could afford a publicist, it was just me and the systems, right? And so for so many people, solopreneurs, small business owners, their first employee, their first contractor is actually a system, right? And that's the reason why I so effectively and so embrace systems in our life. There are probably like 3 or 4 systems that I stand by, one of which I'll definitely share a little bit more about because I think it's worth talking about today. But systems are absolutely a part of my everyday world, and they do help to really elevate my overall leadership skills as well.
That's great. And I also think it makes up for some of our own personal
Absolutely.
challenges and deficiencies
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
we're growing as business leaders and we can't be everything or be great at everything. And I do believe that if we can adopt a system that's tried and true, that works, that's repeatable, right, that allows our space to grow, that it makes up for us being too busy or maybe having a family or children
Absolutely.
screaming in the background when we're trying to get on a phone call or respond to an email, right? And so you're a 17 hats user, right?
I am. I
You're
am. It is one of the systems that the handful of systems that I was just going to say, I really, really stand by. And it is one of the systems that I can count on to continue moving things ahead
yeah.
when I can't, right? Or when I don't want to. All right. I just returned from a lovely vacation, probably the longest vacation I've ever had. And one of the first times in my life that I gave myself permission to not take a computer with me, to not check
Oh,
my emails.
nice.
I know. I mean, it was like nice, but like, oh gosh, and it's because I like my work. Like I legit enjoy what I do. But I knew that this was important for me to, head to Italy, head to Croatia, which was really exciting, and not be bombarded by work. But a lot of the anxiety and angst that I probably would have had 3 or 4 years ago was no longer there. Why? Because if a client was late on an invoice, if a client hadn't signed off on a quote, if a client had a questionnaire that they still needed to complete, guess what? Automatically reminders were going out. And there's an executive assistant that I actually have on my team, but guess what? She's working on other things that are a priority for the organization. And so it was great to be able to have 17 hats in place to automatically send out reminders, to invoices, because we're still a small business, right? We still need our money coming in. And so 17 hats definitely has become a great resource for me in that capacity. And even last year, my father suddenly passed away and I had to be off the grid. Like I was dealing with a lot of emotions and quite frankly, still am sometimes. But even in times of like grief and unexpected loss, when you have the systems in place, it's a little bit of comfort knowing that, okay, I'm dealing with family stuff, I'm dealing with personal stuff, but my business and this thing that I feel good about and I built, it's still going. So it's definitely a system that I stand by.
That's fantastic. You mentioned something that I thought was key, that although you have an executive assistant, that she was focusing on other tasks that are even more important or
Mhm.
also valuable to running the business, right? And I think that's one of the things that before I was a 17 hats user, I realized, you can hire someone to do all of the tasks, but they're just human. They will also make mistakes and
Mhm.
drop the ball and not be consistent or get busy with something else. And it's kind of a habit of ours. If we have an assistant to kind of put everything on them and it piles up. And so, and I realized that more than half of the job I was having them do I could do with 17 hats,
Yeah.
which ultimately can change you from, if you're a small business that's just growing, that's the difference between spending 40, 50,000 on a full-time employee to 20 to 25,000 on a part-time employee, and save you thousands of dollars a year because you took the time to implement a system that works.
Absolutely. And it also can serve as an opportunity for you to prioritize other things in the business that your assistant could be working on, right?
That's right.
I do, I love human interaction. I love human connection. I love this. I wish we could like literally be face to face right now, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I deeply embrace technology that eliminates human error and allows you to scale, grow, shape your business the way that you want to with resources that aren't used on things that can just be automated. And so you're absolutely correct.
Well, you mentioned something earlier I want to hear a little bit more about, Jacqueline. So first of all, thank you so much. I love talking leadership. It is such a core part of who we are as entrepreneurs and as solo business owners. I mean, it's so essential. And I want to ask you, you mentioned the wheel of leadership.
Yes.
Right. And I'm guessing there's more than one thing in there, right? And I think you said 4. Was there 4?
There are 4 wheels / 4 levels of leadership.
Okay, I'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. I'll love to share it. There is the self-leadership wheel, self-leadership level. There is the opportunity to lead other people. There's the opportunity to lead organizations, and there's the opportunity to lead movements. And each of these circles just gets substantially bigger as you go along. Self, others, organizations, and movements. And the reason why this will exist is actually a key part of a book. My second book is coming out in just a couple months called The Unexpected Leader, Discovering the Leader Within You. And it's a key pillar of the book. And the reason why this particular model for leadership is so important is because, as you probably heard, I didn't say anything about a corporate situation. I didn't say anything about like certain situations. Because the reality is, just as much as we're a leader inside of an organization or a leader within your startup or a leader within your small business, you're a leader every single day walking around the world. And there are usually more opportunities for you to lead outside of the career that you chose versus inside of your career, right? When you're delegating something to your children, when you're delegating out tasks for the girls' trip or the boys' trip, if you are at happy hour and you're tipping appropriately, whatever it is, there are all these opportunities for you to be a leader and then to bring those learnings back inside your organization. Yeah. But that leadership wheel is really important because one of my core tenets and one of the things that I am very, very committed to in my life is making sure that people have the tips, tools, resources, and storytelling to start the things that they want to do and elevate to their next level of leadership. And this leadership wheel, right, is the perfect way for you to see yourself as a leader, but then give yourself permission to advance to other levels. And the last thing I'll say, Joey, that's really important as a part of our overall approach to leadership is that within all of the sections, right, all the other 3 sections, you are still a key component of that. And so the rendering, the graphic that we have drawn out for the overall leadership wheel and leadership levels, it shows the self-leadership level as a part of all the other elements. And that's the reason why, if you see yourself leading other people, if you see yourself leading organizations, which most people who are listening today, you are leading an organization. If you see yourself leading movements, there's a key piece of that. And that key piece is you, which is why it's so important for us to see ourselves as leaders, because we're a part of leading other people, we're a part of leading organizations, and we're a part of leading movements. But that's how we utilize the leadership wheel, and that's how we really inspire other people to see themselves as leaders, both professionally and then personally as well.
So that's coming out. You're an author.
I am.
That's fantastic. So what's the name of the book again?
Yeah, thank you for asking. It's called The Unexpected Leader, Discovering the Leader Within You. I'm so excited because we actually partnered with Wiley Publishing. It's a 215-year-old publishing company, one of the largest in the world, to actually produce this book. So it is formally hitting the streets on September the 7th, but we're in pre-sale mode and it's available everywhere. Amazon, Wiley, Target, Barnes & Noble, Bookshop, wherever you get books, it's already available. So I'm really excited about it.
So, and just touching back on the wheel of leadership, while you were talking there, I was thinking about, there's a group of people right now that is starting to think about running a business full time, but they are using it, they're kind of doing it as a side hustle. and they might be in another job. Now, there's a tendency that when we are excited to do, to run a business and we're only doing it part-time, to kind of not put all our effort into the job that we're in right now. Mm-hmm. How important is it? And you mentioned just being a leader everywhere. Yeah. How important is it to step up as a leader, even if you're not running your business full-time right now and you're transitioning out of something else? How important it is to step up as a leader where you're at?
Oh, Joey, you are hitting all my love strings today. Okay, there are two reasons that I am very, very adamant about talking about. Number one is that it is essential that wherever we are at right now, wherever we have been, that we take those learnings, we take those skills, we take that expertise and see how we may utilize it in our future endeavors. So for example, if you have a 9-to-5 job now, right? Maybe you love, maybe you don't love your job, whatever it is, there are skills that you're acquiring right now that if you work it right, if you pay attention, if you are ethical about where you're operating right now, if you completely lean in, you can take those same skills and use them with whatever you're doing next, whether it's another job or whether it's, hopefully you giving yourself permission to start the thing that you want to do in a founder or a small business situation. And so many times I see that people are in a job or in a position or somewhere where they don't love, and they just want to scrap it all. Like, oh, I don't like this. I'm an account rep. I am a salesperson or whatever. I'm just going to scrap all this. Well, guess what? If you open a business, you're going to need those sales skills. You're going to need those communication skills. So that's number one, is not wasting the skills that you are becoming an expert at right now, not wasting them, but utilizing them in order to transfer those skills into whatever it is that you want to do next. The second thing is this: opportunities are everywhere. All right. It has never been my intent to be at any corporate job and to have or even imagine that when I opened up my businesses, right, or I have a new idea, that those corporate jobs, people from those positions would then call me for business. But every single time it's happened, right? And it is because I have a commitment to operating ethically. If I sign up to do something, I'm going to do it to the best of my best of my ability. Every single corporate position that I've held throughout my career, people have in turn years later called me for etiquette training and called me for leadership training because I left that relationship and I left that situation intact. Now, let me be really honest here. Let me just be super transparent here and saying that I get it. Sometimes jobs are hard. Sometimes we work with people that you're hoping you never have to work with again, right? But what I love to make sure that people understand, and what I really like to encourage people to do, is to be, number one, a self-leader, and to be a steward of how you want to be perceived in the future, independent of, what a nasty coworker or an ex-boss said, did, or how they conduct themselves. Mm-hmm. I want you to leave your environments, your relationships, your situation in a way so that people will want to work with you in the future. And so those are the two things that truly come to mind for that question.
Oh, that's great. And no matter what position you're in, I think it's also important to prove to yourself that you have done the most you can possibly do, that you have shown your leadership skills, because confidence is everything. And and if you're thinking about turning your side hustle into a full-time business, it's a big step and there's risk involved. So if we can be, the best we can be where we're at, it does develop a sense of confidence that goes a long way. I was when I was working in a corporate field, it was a media research company, and they were one of the largest in the nation. And I started off on the phones, cold calling people randomly to do surveys.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, it is the worst kind. For those who are making a living doing that, kudos to you, because sitting there all day long with the headphones and smiling and, exuding energy with your voice, wow, that is difficult.
Yes.
But I committed to something and I said, I'm going to be the absolute best at what I do. And without even asking, the quality assurance team that was listening in recognized it and offered or suggested that I apply for their position. And then I did, and I got into there. And then once I did that, I said, you know what? I'm going to learn everything there is to know about it. It still wasn't where I wanted to be.
Right.
I had my eyes set on another area. But I knew that I had to show leadership where I was. And then I ended up being a training and development specialist over that. And it was ultimately what I wanted to do. And it was in the same company, just being positive and putting everything out there. Man, did I learn a lot. You know, even though when I was done there, I learned so much to carry into the world of business and entrepreneurship. So it was such a great point there.
Yeah. You know, I'll also say, Joey, that it's so interesting. And you know this, when you are transitioning from a corporate role to full-time entrepreneurship, side hustling, you know, whatever your transition looks like, there are so many skills that you don't think will come back around again. And you look up and you're just like, wait a minute, I too have to have some component of cold calling, right? My
absolutely.
I mean, honestly, a huge component of cold calling.
Yeah.
And so it's just so interesting how you think that, oh no, I'm done with corporate and let me just go over to a different world. Like, it's a different thing, but so many of those same leadership skills, so many of those same qualities apply when you go on the other side. And sometimes it's a bit harder because you are solely responsible of managing that. Like, you're not getting training on a regular, like you're responsible for that. And so the more that you collect up those skills and you become better at those skills, just the easier that it is on the other side where you're actually just self-managing yourself.
Yeah, you know, Jacqueline, when you're saying that, I'm kind of going back into when I first started working, and that was at 16 years old, and I was a cashier at Kroger, right? But I'm going to tell you something. At 16 years old, I was so proud that I had the fastest line moving through, and I would get from nice old ladies, I would get compliments saying, oh my gosh, you're doing everything so fast, man. I had my codes memorized of every fruit in that place, right? I still know 2011 is bananas. I still remember it, right? And so was it 4011? Okay, I can't remember, but I knew it all. And I was so proud of it. No, even if that was the job I was doing. Now, I was terrible. At some point, I did end up trying to sell Cutco knives. I was horrible at that. But I've done it all. And so, you know, in my journey doing all of that. So yes, do the best you can, but somehow I ended up loving knives. So there was that. But, you know, so in telling that story, it reminds me of something you said a little earlier, which I would love to hear about, is you mentioned storytelling.
Yeah.
As part of leadership. Explain that a little bit. I would love to know about that. I mean, I love storytelling. Storytelling in sales is such a huge thing, right? There's so much psychology to that, but how does it fit into leadership?
Absolutely. And so the reason why storytelling and truly auditory learning is a part of my world is because that is who I am. I learned a lot later in life that I'm an auditory learner. Like, I learned much more effectively through just listening. It is the reason why I produce a podcast called Just Start From Ideas to Action. But the reality is, in the world of leadership, whether we are leading ourselves, leading others, or just simply doing business with other people, it's important to really embrace the idea that other people may have a different learning and communication style that we do. There's auditory learning, right? There's a focus on kinesthetic, which is much more, touching. There are people that learn and connect in different ways. And for lots of people, storytelling or auditory learning or auditory connection is a huge way for them to understand more clearly what you're trying to sell, what you're trying to get across to them, the vision that you're trying to really project. And so I've learned over time that as much as I actually at my core tend to be someone that just wants to get straight to the point, like, okay, what's the problem? Let's get to the solution and move on. There's so many people around me, and even me sometimes, that want to go on the journey, right? They want to understand the details a little bit more. And it's just another opportunity to storytell, whether you're doing it in 15 seconds or you're doing it in 15 minutes. And so for me, storytelling is a huge part of how I ensure that I, as a leader, am connecting with as many people as possible and taking them on the journey of whatever their leadership journey or their leadership level looks like next.
I see. That's fantastic. Well, Thank you so much. Gosh, I think, just hearing, especially about the levels in the wheel of leadership, that's such a good visual to get, right?
Mhm.
It's such a good visual to know that I'm on a journey, I have a path, and there's levels to my growth, and there's really, I mean, the last one is movements. Come on, Jacqueline,
I
a
mean, it's
movement.
major, a movement, leading movement. And what's crazy is that most people that lead movements, they were never on it was never in their plans to lead a movement, right? They
Absolutely,
just
yeah.
slowly got a little better at leading this and leading that. And all of a sudden it's like, you know what, with these skills, I can change the world,
Mm.
right? And then, the other thing I did want to add on, Joey, that I think is really important in the leadership world, especially as it relates to storytelling and all the other tactics that you can use, is that there are so many different leadership styles, right? We often hear servant leadership and democratic leadership or dictator leadership, and there are, 8 or 9 different leadership styles. And depending on who you are, you probably have a default, a way that you automatically connect with people or connect with the world, etc. By embracing things like storytelling, there are some people that are just going to resonate with that a little bit more.
Mm.
But the other reason why I bring up leadership styles is because some people, even after hearing this conversation and reading The Unexpected Leader, hopefully, they still may not feel like there's a place for me. They're like, I hear you and it sounds cool and I think I should be doing it, or I think I should be leaning into more leadership stuff, but I don't lead like Jacqueline, and I don't lead like Joey, and I don't lead like Donovan, and I don't lead like Keisha or Kim or Pam or whomever else. And my response to that is you don't have to, right? Because there are all these leadership styles that exist that allow you to flex in and out of situations based on situational leadership, that where you can see yourself as a leader at different levels, according to leadership will, and also based on different styles. And so I really try to make sure that people have a whole toolkit of things that they can go into to make sure that they feel equipped to be a better leader, and understanding the leadership will, and also understanding that you have options in terms of your style for leadership. It just gets people a little bit more closer to being confident on their leadership journey.
Jacqueline, is there a quiz or some kind of online assessment out there that can be taken just to kind of discover that style?
It's great that you asked that, because actually it is an engagement opportunity in the book. And I know I feel like I'm just like, hey, go pick up.
Oh, no, that's great.
But it is in the book. It was very intentional that as a part of, I believe, chapter 4, we talk about how to identify your default leadership style. And so really it's pretty easy to check out the book. It's JacquelineMBaker.com/unexpected is where it lives.
Right.
But Joey, I think that you have sparked some interest in me to making sure that there is a digital and online quiz so that people can check out what their style is. And so more to come on that. But if you can't wait for the quiz, you can certainly pick up the book.
It is a great way to get people through the door. So all right. Well, that pretty much wraps all of my serious questions up. Okay. For today. And so you went to Italy and Croatia.
I did.
So I know Italy is a common place to visit. I'm a foodie. I've been out there and I took a food tour for like a week out there. I loved it. Tell me, what was Croatia like?
That's a great question. First of all, the reason why I went to Croatia, let me tell you this, is because my first book, which is over my right shoulder, called Leader by Mistake, a good friend of mine and the editor of my first book is from Croatia. And she was trying to get me to make a stop on our book tour to Croatia for the first book. And I was like, Christina, girl, I don't think so. But I said, okay, one day when I'm closer, let's do it. It just so happened that when I was in Italy, her and her husband were in Croatia. And so they came across the border and met us in Trieste, Italy, and then escorted us across to Croatia, which was amazing. So it has, of course, several port towns. It's beautiful. It's amazing. I mean, I think everything's amazing over there because while, we have things that are like 100 years old here in the States. I mean, there are things that were built in 463. You're just like, what? Like 463? So it's just, I mean, it's just like, what? So it's beautiful. Water is beautiful. I think that one of the most like shocking things to me was, number one, the heat. Like it was so hot, like I was changing clothes multiple times a day. But the second thing is, and Christina said this to us, that there are beaches, but people lay out on the rocks. And I was thinking like, maybe like instead of sand, they're just like small pebbles. No. on the side of the mountain, like there's just rocks that people just lay their towels on and lay out. And that's what they call the beach. And I'm just like, this is very interesting. Like, because it's not cushiony. There's no cabanas. It's just like towel, rock, and then a little bit of water or a lot of water. So Croatia it's a beautiful place, very warm this time of year. Food is very meat heavy, right? So I feel like I'm almost in a detox right now from eating all that meat from over there. But
I'm headed there immediately.
But a place I would definitely consider going back to, but it was lovely.
Awesome. So I got two more questions for you.
Sure.
And one is, outside of, let's say someone just met you as you're vacationing and they don't know you're the author or a leadership guru or a business person or anything, right? What's one little quirky thing about Jacqueline that may be unexpected?
Oh, okay. One is that I don't know where I picked this up from, and I don't think I've ever said this to anyone and admitted this out loud. But I often, throughout the day, am reading words backwards. Like, I don't know. I think me and my brother had a competition when we were kids of who could figure out, like, if you read something backwards, like who could figure out what it really says. And I do this like all day long. And I never say anything about it. It's just in my mind. I'm like, oh yeah, Lumix. Like, I'm looking at my Lumix camera right now. I'm like, oh, backwards, that's Skamul. I don't know why I do this. And it sounds ridiculous to say out loud.
Did you play records backwards too when you were a child, just to hear the hidden message?
That sounds scary. I don't know, just like this thing from when I was a kid just totally sticks with me. I do that all the time. And I'll say one, it's not even a quirky thing. It's just generally who I am, literally on the inside. I love hosting people in my home. Like, I love it. Like, literally, before I jumped on with you, I was preparing my home for two guests that we have. So they get a custom welcome thing. There's signs throughout the house that say, welcome to our home. Here's the Wi-Fi code. Wow. I send out a survey to find out what kind of food they like to eat. And I love hosting people in my home. And so I wouldn't necessarily say it's a quirky thing, but I just feel like if you've taken the time to allow us to be in for you, I'm responsible for you, you're in my care, like, I'm going to do what's possible to make this the best possible and comfortable place while you're here with us. And so, well, it's just a thing.
Jacqueline, that says a lot about you. And for all of those listening, definitely follow Jacqueline. Where can we find you on social media?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Magical Jax. The word magical, JAX, on Instagram and also on Twitter is probably where I spend my most time. But of course, I'm available and open to new connections on LinkedIn as well, and just Jacqueline M. Baker.
That's great. If there was one simple thought for somebody who's just starting their business, they're on their own, just why it's important to really focus in on leadership for themselves, what would that be as we wrap up here?
There are so many, but what I will say is that, number one, there are two words that I live by. I trademark the words because I feel strongly about them, and it's just start. I also strongly believe that so many of your questions get answered in the action, but it takes you giving yourself permission to lead and to see yourself as a leader and putting one foot in front of the other every single day to get to your next step. Yeah. It's much easier to get to your next step if you see yourself as a leader out the gate. And so those are words that I live by. Those are pieces of inspiration that I sprinkle into everything that I talk about every single week, and really something that I hope that your audience will truly embrace and live by as well.
Well, thank you, Jacqueline. That was all just pure gold. And for those of you who are new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. And we'll be back with a lot more videos just like this, focusing on businesses of one and just really how to grow yourself and your business. Well, thank you again, everybody. Till next time. Thank you, Jackie. I appreciate you coming on and sharing all that wonderful information with us.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.